SharlotHall was an unusual woman for her time, a literate child of the frontier. Born in 1870, she traveled with her family from Kansas to Arizona Territory in 1882. The impressions of this journey and a fascination with the frontier remained with her all her life. Largely self-educated, she loved ideas and Western written arts and expressed her fascination with Arizona frontier life through prose and poetry. The Indians, miners, ranchers, and politicians of early Arizona were her subjects. In 1909, she was appointed territorial historian for Arizona, a position she held for 2 years. In 1928, Ms. Hall made an agreement with the state of Arizona to move her extensive collection of artifacts into the old governor's mansion and open it as a museum. Her diligent efforts inspired others to contribute to the preservation of the early Arizona history. After her death in 19... Downtown Prescott, Arizona is a colorful panorama of the Southwest history. Welcome to SharlotHall. Here the homes and lifestyle of those who lived during Arizona's early years are again brought to life so that we may share an appreciation of our heritage. Through the varied collections of artifacts, clothing, tools, vehicles, weapons, one can look into the lives and cultures of those who settled this part of the West and the Native Americans who preceded them. The museum buildings form an architectural sequence spanning the years from the founding of Prescott in 1864 to the present. Each house is furnished in the style of the time they typify. Each year, the first week in June, the Folks Art Fair is held at this museum. We are going to take you through the fair and all the various exhibits. We are going to start with the William C. Bashford House. This building, completed with solarium, represents the last 20 years before statehood. Built in 1877, about 7 blocks east of its present location, it was moved to the museum grounds in 1974 with the help of Prescott citizens and other friends of the museum. This elegant house now includes the museum book and gift shop. This is the front door to the Bashford House. 3 rooms of this home have been set up as a book and gift shop. This is one of the rooms. When I'm done. One of the beautiful chests they had of the era, and he now uses as doll display. This is also in the gift shop portion of the Bradford House. The front door is this gorgeous hall tree. Inside the hall tree they have some early period costumes on display also. For the Folks Art Fair, the quilting demonstration is being held in the Bradford House. This is the working loom demonstration, making a colorful rug at this time. There are members of the Mountaintop Quilting Club of Prescott quilting a beautiful pieced quilt. This is the inside of the beautiful solarium, which is on the east side of the Bradford House. Another beautiful piece of furniture that is in this house. This is a china cabinet filled with beautiful artifacts of the period. This is the hearth and mantelpiece in the main living area of the Bashford House. Note the beautiful porcelain inlay around the hearth itself. Due to the crowds today, much of the house is closed and not open for full inspection, but we'll conclude our tour of the Bashford House with this portrait, which is over the beautiful mantel that we just shown of Louise Eben Bashford, the mistress of the home. This is the gazebo. Continuous music, storytelling, and a variety of entertainment is provided at the gazebo during the Folks Art Fair. Right now there is a demonstration on chair caning. It provides a nice place to rest during the long, full day. And during the long summers in Prescott, in the cool breezes. There is Sunday afternoon in the park concerts. I'm sorry, I was okay. On the lawn in front of the gazebo, they have set up the Weavers and Spinners demonstration for this year's Folks Art Fair. We will walk around and show you the various methods of weaving and spinning. I'll drop this stuff.
See sheep, there's a couple more in the pen here, and they will be a shawl by tomorrow night. Today is Saturday. Wool is sheared from the sheep. It is brought over here, and different vegetation produces different colors, and it is dyed. Wool has been colored and dried. It is then carded.
Dried, and now it's going to get carded. I'm not a good carder. That's all right.
Of ourselves. First, we tease it by pulling all the impurities out by hand, all the hay and
everything.
Dirt.
First, you roll out your fleece, and you take all of the real bad short stuff out and the stuff that's got a lot of manure in it. And then you sit down. You might wash it first or not. Doesn't matter. Then you pull it all apart and fuzz like this. Pull out all of the all of the shafts and the burrs and such that's in it.
it's carded, which you already saw. Once we have it carded, we pull it out into long, thin strips.
It's called roving.
Called what?
Roving. Then you can spin it.
If we have it teased, there are two routes we can go. We can either wind the yarn by hand and then wind it up on a drop spindle, or we can put it on the spinning wheel and make yarn out of it. Here we see some members of the mountain spinners and weavers making yarn on the old spinning wheel. Have the yarn spun, we can put it in the loom and weave it. This is a small loom here. Get a little bigger loom with some of the finished product.
This is a Western mine hoist, 1906. It was recovered from the Gold Bar mine near Prescott and restored by the Antique Auto Club here in Prescott and donated to the museum.
This is a typical 4-cycle engine. As you can tell, it has very large flywheels on it, and the winch drum you see in the rear here would have had the cable wound on it.
This is the Territorial Women's Memorial Rose Garden. There are over 300 roses here, each dedicated to a special Arizona pioneer woman. Pauline Weaver Tombstone. Pauline Weaver was an early American trapper, explorer, and Army Scout. In 1847, he was hired by General Kearney as a military guide to lead the Mormon Battalion from Santa Fe to California. He led Peoples and Jack Swilling back into the Bradshaw Mountains. Gold was found and Camp Weaver sprung up. It was later known as Weaversville, then Weaver, and the Mountain of Gold became known as Rich Hill. In 1867, he was a guide attached to Camp Lincoln, later known as Camp Verde. He was buried there with military honors. In 1892, the remains of all the military personnel, including Weaver, were moved to San Francisco, but Pauline Weaver was not to rest there, but was to be a wanderer in death as he had been in life. In 1928, a movement was started in Prescott to bring his remains to the spot where in 1863 he made as near a permanent camp as he ever did in his life. This spot is on the grounds of the SharlotHall Museum. Next, we'll go into the Mountain Man display of the Folks Art Fair.
I bowed my head and I said, Heavenly Father, deliver me from this dangerous predicament I'm in. I'm lacking faith.
Okay, what would happen here is you take this and one all your short story.
Good thing there was no. Oh, it's right there. I feel it. What? Use this one.
Okay, you do that and then you put your powder right this thing here.
that's why it did that.
Yeah, yeah.
I didn't see you drop anything
This
in there.
this powder would go through this hole and light your charge powder on the inside.
Oh.
That's a set trigger, makes it like a hair trigger, so your shot's real clean and accurate.
Ranch House building. This building was built by SharlotHall in the 1930s to represent the lifestyle of the early cowboys of the area. Many of their tools of their trade are on display. These are some of the items on display in the ranch house. Note the glass walls that have been constructed to protect the artifacts. Is by a man who makes furniture out of logs and sticks. And these are some of his creations. Nothing is for sale here at SharlotHall on Folk Art Days, but you can give your card and have people know about your business and order items. An interesting way to use the old grindstones and the matasse to set up a display at the museum. The Civil War camp exhibit. This isn't always a popular exhibit because everybody was interested in the Civil War. In the background is Fort Misery. This was one of the first log dwellings in Arizona Territory. It was moved to the museum site. It was an actual fort when it was built.
See typical gear which would have been carried by a soldier during the Civil War, spread out on the blanket. We have a soldier talking to his lady, both dressed in typical Civil War era dress. We saw the camp fire, and here's the cook set, and that was the camp cookie carrying a coffee pot. Display of typical gear carried during the Civil War period. A typical Civil War soldier talking to one of the visitors here at the museum today.
This windmill is listed on the National Register of Historic Places. It is an operating 1985 iron turbine windmill. It was moved to the museum from a local ranch. Note the stone cistern built beside it. Chilean wheel was used locally in the Bradshaw Mountains. The Chilean heel was developed in Latin America by a Spanish to crush gold and silver ore. It stood vertical and was supported on an axle, one end of which pivoted on a stand, while the other was fastened to a horse. As the horse circled the pivot, the wheel rolled and crushed the ore placed beneath it on the stone floor. The schoolhouse is a replica of Prescott's first public school.
Okay, what you see being dipped in the hot melted wax is dip candles. They start out with nothing but a wick on a stick, then dip and cool, dip and cool, dip and cool, and cool. Cooling bucket's supposed to be right next to the melted wax, but since there's so many children making candles, the cooling bucket has been placed about 20 or 30 yards away. You can see the little kids going down there with their dip candles. That candle? Are you making a candle? Hold it up and let me see it. What are you doing to make that candle?
3. This is the SharlotHall building. This building was constructed of native rock and pine logs by the Civil Works Administration and has been the museum's primary exhibition hall since its completion in 1934. It includes 2 exhibition areas, the Hartzell Room, which tells the story of prehistoric cultures and historic Indian people of Arizona, and the main gallery, which has an account of the settling of Prescott through artifacts, photos, and narrative. This is the Arizona Governor's Mansion. This building was built on this site in 1864 from ponderosa pine logs cut from nearby forest. It housed several territorial officials: John Goodwin, Secretary, later Governor Richard McCormick, Chief Justice William Turner, and Henry Fleury of the Governor Goodwin staff. Although the first territorial legislature met here during the cold winter of 1964 and 65, this was never the capital. When the state territorial capital was moved to Tucson in 1867, Governor McCormick, owner of the residence, sold it to Henry Fleury. This is the front view of the governor's mansion. The other side was the side view. The mansion is furnished as it might have been during the 1864s to the 1867 period, its earliest and most significant years. It is a mansion only considering that the majority of Prescott citizens were then living in tents, wagons, or crude shacks at the time of its construction. This is the John C. Fremont House. This home was built in 1865 and was the home of the famous Pathfinder, while he was the 5th territorial governor of Arizona. In 1878 through 1881. Its construction reflects the rapid growth of Prescott during its first 10 years. It is made of sawn wood from the local mill. It contrasts greatly with the great hand-hewn logs of the governor's mansion. The furnishings in this home are from the 1875 to the 1881 period. During the Folks Art Fair, the tatting, sewing, knitting, all handcraft, women's handcraft demonstrations are set up inside this building. This is the Museum Center. This building, completed in 1979, is the hub around which the museum activities revolve. It houses a large archive research library, a combined program and exhibition hall, and is atmospherically controlled storage areas for the museum's collections and for the offices. It is here that much of the behind-the-scenes work necessary to operating the museum is accomplished. Angie Henry has been the Folks Art Fair coordinator for many, many years now and does an excellent job of obtaining participants and exhibits. This is the transportation building. This building was built in 1992 to replace the old automobile repair garage that was used for the museum's vehicle collection. But since the vehicle collection grew, they needed a larger building. On display are the SharlotHall's own 1927 Star car, a Modoc stagecoach, a high-wheeled bicycle, and a variety of other forms of transportation used in early Arizona. The building in the background, the red building with the 2 white windows, was built as an automobile repair garage in 1937 in Prescott, Arizona, and was moved to the SharlotHall Museum. It did house the museum's vehicle collection, but as the collection grew, a larger building was built for the automobile collection. This is an H.K. Porter locomotive. This engine was built about 1887 and was used on the mining spur near the town of Congress, Arizona. There is now an ongoing contribution fund being set up to build a special location for this train here at the museum. Donations are requested, and hopefully with grants and things they will be able to set up their train tracks and building at a later date. This is a newly completed folk dancing plaza. Here during the day at the SharlotHall Folk Fair, they have continuous music presentations, dancing, clogging, fiddle playing, various groups that donate their time. In the rear, this is the SharlotHall parking center, or parking area. During the SharlotHall Folk Fair days, the Antique Auto Car Club brings their vintage vehicles here for display. Towards the back are a series of old pumps and machinery used to run the various mines in this area. This is the interior of Fort Misery. This is actually the old Fort Misery that was moved to the SharlotHall location. Note the reproduction furnitures they have put in here, like the old pie pantry, the cooking cabinets, the table, benches, plus the original fireplace that was in the fort, plus an old cook stove, old heating stove, and the wood box. This is also in Fort Misery. We want to point out here the wire mesh cage they have kind of installed in the doorway. This has a big gate that can be closed, and people are only allowed into the very entry, but they can see all of the exhibit through the mesh wire. This is to protect the artifacts in the building.
This is two squaws taking my picture.
No. Black Mad Max.
Oh, this is Mad Max taking my picture. He's got a camera. Oh, he just hid the camera. Showing you the outside of all the buildings. Now we're going to start over and show you the inside of all the buildings. We're in the main hall of the SharlotHall building. The piano you hear going in the background is an old player piano. Right now there's a gentleman sitting there actually playing it. Many of the displays in this part of the building are behind glass. There's one right there. And there's about 3 main rooms in the building. The displays dedicated to the early miners and prospectors that came into the Arizona Territory. Reflection in the glasses, but you'll also see the display behind the glass. This one is dedicated to the soldiers of the early Arizona Territory. The display is dedicated to the early firefighters. And of course here you see a display dedicated to the general store or mercantile that existed in the territorial days. We're in another room of the SharlotHall building dedicated to the Southwest Indian artifact collection. These are just some of the different peoples of Arizona, artifacts that have been dug up in their ruins. And like I say, they're all in glass cases around the room.
was sort of administrative. This was kind of reception areas where they had church services and Christmas parties and so forth. This area here. Okay, the tools on the wall have been used to build this building. The tools in the case there's no authentication on them, but they are tools of the times, some a little later. And it's just a display for interest. About 13 years ago, we threw a tent over this building and sort of retreated the wood. The lumber was drying out and began to crumble on itself, so they came in chemically and treated it to stabilize it. They dug out all the old adobe and put this new matrix in. And the floor, when it was first built, was padded dirt. And eventually, Wyatt and Berger Orr did the sawmill, had the sawmill out of Broom Creek. But they didn't have it when this building was built, so there was no flooring. And through the years, somebody had put a little flooring in here and something else in there, you know. So 13 years ago, when they rehabbed this building, they dug it all out, put a rat wall in, and put all the new flooring in. So this is all new. And when they did that, they sifted the dirt. You might see in this case, when they sifted the dirt, putting the new flooring in, they came across buttons, earrings, little pin in their tabs, even baby teeth. But then there's this poor little mouse. He's mummified. Obviously, through the years, when they tried to save the wood, to preserve it, he happened to get in the way of a good shot of preservation because they mummified him. And he's quite old. He's been around for a while. There's all here.
Okay, this would have been the dining area, showing the kitchen table, and a couple of chairs and a few plates on the table.
Later on when Wyatt, before he got by a death list.
I just saw a movie last night.
This is shows a couple of bunks, a sleeping area. Cavalry officer talking to
well, they're going to get a
gentleman there.
an officer. They're going to
Now
shoot
the rail you see in the foreground, if anybody jumps over that rail and disturbs the artifact shown in the rear, it is a security system, and an alarm will go off.
She came from Pennsylvania, came down through the isthmus. Of course, the Panama Canal wasn't dug yet. Came through the isthmus. They put her on an Army ambulance and brought her up here. She was
And
with
who was
us
she?
very long.
She was the second wife of who?
No, she was the wife of the second governor.
Oh, the
McCormick.
wife of the second governor.
McCormick, yes, John McCormick.
And this room would have been what, the sitting room?
Well, part of it, yes. You can see where the division is right over here. If you notice, be where the church services were held, where Christmas parties were held. It was just an open area. And remember that the enlisted man slept in tents outside in the forest. This was all forest land. And this was their only really covered meeting spot that they had. The dining room beyond, of course, there were 5 officers here, and the governor and his wife in this building. The governor and his wife had the apartment on this side. They ate with the officers in the dining room, private kitchen. Thank you, thank you.
So,
The lady is to represent Mrs. McCormick, who was the wife of the second governor of the territory. She brought with her from Philadelphia a clipping from her mother's rose bush called the Boussault rose, planted here, and it thrived very generously because many people in the town have clippings from her rose bush. And she was with us very long. She died the day before her 25th birthday in childbirth. The baby died also. It was rough going in those days for the ladies.
It matters much the stone on obsidian because it fractures a lot easier. And the real art of knocking off the blanks, which would be the initial piece, is evaluating the material and being able to understand how it fractures, which I have a lot to learn about that. This piece is rather granular and it's hard to knock off big flat pieces, but here's the idea. You want to try to get a 90 or less degree of an angle where you're hitting.
gold discovered in the Prescott Hill. These are the demonstrator you saw previously was showing how to make arrowheads. And here
That wasn't very
you
good.
can gold.
But trust me, it's good. That's how it happens.
The gentleman you see here is showing the folks how to do a little wood carving. Some of his wares he's finished carving. The volunteer showing the folks how to wood carve.
Campbell. Like a soup
And these demonstrations are all on the front porch of the governor's mansion, which you just saw the inside of. Okay, this is an old-time camera on the front porch of the Fremont home. Let's go inside and see what's in there. Okay, we're inside the, I guess this would have been the living room. There's a piano and a table there with some picture books on it, an old kaleidoscope. And what you're looking at here is a early sewing machine, 1863. And it is a treadle machine. And this is sitting in the bedroom of the Fremont home. Here's a view of the dining room with a lady sitting there at the table and the plates and silverware in the background. And this was the kitchen area of the Fremont home. The old wood burning stove, the wood box in the background, probably some dishes and stuff in that cabinet. Little ice box or cooler, and the sink area. Water was probably carried in buckets from a spring outside. We're now inside the transportation building, and this shows you some of the early bicycles. Some didn't even have pedals. There's a big wheeler with pedals. Some early surreys or buckboards, as you've heard them referred to in the movies. Stagecoach you see here was used to carry the mail and passengers throughout the territory. It was donated to the museum in 1937. And here is a Studebaker wagon, as you can tell by the green color. Old freight wagon used to haul freight around the territory. Arizona or bust. This is typical of the covered wagons that you see in the movies and read about in books. Last but not least, SharlotHall's own Star car was driven throughout the territory during SharlotHall's days. This car belonged to her. Okay, we're in the main building here at the museum, and this is the counter. You see the lady in the watching the monitors behind her, and these monitors are hidden cameras, video or TV cameras, watching all the valuable artifacts in the museum. And through the doors here is the research library in that end of the building. This end of the building houses the wildlife or nature study displays. A few of the species of fish found in Arizona here. A beaver chewing on a branch. There are still a few pockets of beaver left in Arizona. Bear. Over again, those folks walking in front of the camera. And here's the famous mountain lion getting ready to pounce on somebody. Here's a white-tailed deer. A coyote looking for something to eat. Here we have the javelina, or wild pig as it's commonly known as. And a critter done made his nest in a car. I have a car just like that at home. This is commonly known as pack rat in Arizona. A display on bats in Arizona. I don't know how many hundred species there are, but there's quite a few of them. They will not get tangled up in your hair, and they will not collide with you. Bats are just nice, cuddly, furry little animals, just like rattlesnakes. Here is a desert tortoise. You see these wandering around out in the hills once in a while. And here's a hoot owl. You hear these all night when you're camped out in the desert. A little ground squirrel. You see these running across the road in front of you. This is the antelope, common to open spaces throughout the territory, mostly up north. These are just a spattering of signs that are painted on some of the displays you've just seen. Notice movement or people's reflections in the glass fronts that are on all these displays. They're all behind glass, and you can see the reflection of the people in the museum here moving around. Okay, here we see a modern farrier making a horseshoe. Blacksmiths did not shoe horses, and I'll explain that a little later on. You'll notice hear the roar of the gas-fired forge in the background. Many modern blacksmiths and farriers have gone to propane and gas because it's cheaper than burning coal. And this is the horse that we're going to put the shoes on a little later on. Now, the blacksmith started out as the manufacturer, and he had in his shop a farrier who shod horses. The blacksmith did not do this originally. He was too busy making needles, scissors, knives, butcher knives, anything else that was manufactured. This was before the Industrial Revolution. In about 1800, the Industrial Revolution came along, and all the things that the blacksmiths had been making started to be made in factories, employing many, many people. So the blacksmith had to lay the farrier off and start shoeing horses himself because it was the only work he could get. This lasted throughout the 1800s into the 1900s. In the same period, the blacksmith changed roles from manufacturer to fixer of broken items. Your farm implement broke, you took it to the blacksmith to get it fixed. Your butcher knife broke, you took it to the blacksmith to get it fixed. This was during the 1800s, early 1900 period. Here we have the old anvil with a hammer laying on it. Here's a mountain man, I'll be darned. Here's all the people lined up at the blacksmith shop door, watching what's going on inside. And this is the blacksmith. No, this is the mountain man. No. What is this? Oh, you must be changing from a mountain man to a blacksmith. What are you doing? Is you leaving?
That's what it is.
A what?
Gain weight.
Okay, here we have a early vintage road grader, horse-drawn period. Probably late 1800, early 1900 vintage. Some of the shoes which the farrier was making, different styles. The farrier, modern school trained farrier, can do a lot of corrective work on your horse and make him walk right. Somebody don't know what they're doing will cripple a horse in a hurry. Now that you know the relationship between the farrier and the blacksmith, we're going to show you the Yavapai Chapter Arizona Archaeological Society. And then we'll go back and watch the horse being shod. Two lovely young ladies here are gluing some pots back together. A very tedious job, as you know, if you ever tried to work a crossword puzzle. Not a crossword puzzle. What kind of puzzle is that? Has a whole bunch of parts. Anyway, they're gluing this pot all back together. They found it little pieces.
Prehistoric Indian was found in this area. It's made out of clay. It's 800 years old.
And what you see here are Dutch ovens with biscuits being baked in them and some cowboy coffee. They pitch a horseshoe in there, and when it floats to the top, the coffee is ready to drink. Checking on some biscuits there, lifting the lid off. What you see here is some cream put in the churn, and the little crank turn until it turns to butter. You remove the butter, and what you have left is buttermilk. The young lady here is using what we call churn that you see in the movie. Go back to colonial days. And the same principle, making butter. And here we have the volunteers making more biscuit dough. Here we see at the table the folks are putting homemade butter and honey and other good stuff on the Dutch oven biscuits. We're here and get a cup of good old cowboy coffee with a horseshoe floating on the top. That is some kind of delicious.
Bud in your eye. Here's bud in your eye, yeah. Cowboy coffee.
Well, that horse sure changed since we last saw him. This music you hear in the background is the singer up here at the amphitheater. Let's go in for a closer look.
Hey, always seemed to know just where he was going. You see, when you give your heart to somebody, buddies, you take a chance. Now, I wanna walk into all of those moccasin tracks. Hey, Duke, could you take me back? I wanna walk into all of those moccasin tracks. Hey, Duke, can you take me back? I wanna walk into all of those moccasin tracks.
Okay, we're up here at the parking lot area. And the antique, some of the antique cars parked up here. The car you see here was put together in 1921. You notice it's got two engines. I guess it'd be called a hot rod back in them days. We called them strip downs when we was kids. And the parts were from 1913 on up. We're going to crack her up and see if we can get her running. They're both engines going. Fantastic. There's an old B model Ford with a 1931 license plate on it. Okay, what you see here is another 4-cycle engine and with big flywheels on it, and you see the water coming out of the pipe there. And this one is rigged up as a pump on the back of a car, back of a truck. About a 1930 or early 40 vintage truck. Another little pump going here. It's also mounted on the side of this truck. These little engines like this were just general purpose. The farmers used them mostly. This is a 1915 vintage, 1914 vintage engine. You notice these go round and around and around and around and around, and they run down and then they hit. And not like the engines of today that run continuously. They only fire on about every fourth or fifth revolution. You would have used this little engine for. There's a fan in the background by you can compare the size of it. Bigger engine in the background turning a very large flywheel, and it would have been a belt, a big flat belt hooked to the flywheel. There's various pieces of machinery on the farm. An early vintage tractor. Probably jacked one wheel up and put the belt to it to run farm machinery with. Here we see an engine running with a flat belt hooked to the flywheel. Flat belt comes down here, turns this shaft, twists and turns the radial saw blade. And have an early vintage wash machine, an old wringer wash machine. And look down here, being run by a gasoline engine. Another early vintage motor. So what we have here is probably a Gene or 1920 diesel truck. But look back here. Chain drive. A couple of early vintage fire trucks. Probably 1920, 1930 vintage. All the vehicles that you've seen here today and all the motors running, the vehicles have been driven in here. They all run. Come back and watch his horse being shot.
As we come to the end of our tour of SharlotHall and the wonderful Prescott Folk Art Days, we'd like to leave with this poem, part of a poem written by SharlotHall. Here lives sweet memories, whose perfume is like old-time flowers, stories of love and death and gold that fill those long-gone hours. But memories, like flowers, bear living seeds, and hearts are garden beds in which they grow. And faith and hope and courage of the past we still today may know.